I just finished watching season 3 of The Boys, and it was so good that I binged 4 episodes today before I'm here making this video. I was hanging out with my baby, and I couldn't do anything, and I just kept watching The Boys over and over and over again. So today, I wanted to talk about this fantastic season. If you guys are brand new here, this is where we take a season from a show or an entire movie, and we talk about the entire plot. I give my thoughts on it as we continue on throughout the story, and as always, guys, I would love to know what you think down below. Spoilers ahead. Thank you for coming. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with many YouTube channels. Let's get into it. So, the season begins off with the boys working for Victoria Newman, and we just realized at the end of last season, of course, that Newman is the head popper. That's what everybody keeps calling her, and I find it, like, so funny, actually, how you have such a serious show, right? And then you have somebody, hey, she's the head popper. Like, I don't know. I find it funny, and that's something that if you guys are just watching this episode, something that I love about The Boys is how realistic it is to real life. Like, if these superheroes were here in real life, this is kind of the avenue that we would go through with them. Like, this is pretty much as realistic as you can get, which I think is really fascinating of a show instead of just having your typical superhero type thing. And throughout this first episode, guys, there's honestly not really too much to dive into because it's kind of setting things up. We're introduced to Victoria Newman as like more of a solid character. She's kind of close with Huey. We're introduced to the new version of Compound V, which grants people superpowers for 24 hours. And I think that's what we're going to get into too, by the way. I love what they did with Butcher's storyline. I love it. Somebody who just hates soups. And I don't want to say like and I have to be careful with all of these words, hating people for the way that they are. I find it fascinating that you have a character like that, right, who just hated soups no matter who they were. You could have a good girl like Annie, and he just hated her just for the way she is, and then he becomes one of them, right? So I love that, but Edgar fails to sell this new version of Compound V. Maeve and Butcher start getting together and go on this secret mission, and this is where Butcher's a little bit introduced to the new version. Huey, and pretty much the only thing to note throughout the entire first episode is at the end of the episode, Huey encounters Nadia or Victoria Newman, which she doesn't want to go by that name. There was a suspicious character kind of floating around, and in the back alley, she ended up popping his head. And not knowing that Huey's there, this is where the season kind of takes off, because Huey wants to get the boys back together because he just witnessed somebody pop, the head explode, and everybody's been wondering for so long, who is this character? And what's funny enough about this is we enter last season with the head popper, and she doesn't really do anything throughout the entire season, and now we're ending season 3 over here, and that ended with the head popper. I almost keep saying pimple popper. So we end up getting the boys together, and then they just decide to investigate the death of this new character named Soldier Boy, and I didn't realize that Soldier Boy would be such a huge part, and we're going to get to Soldier Boy once he's actually introduced, but right now they're investigating this guy, this weapon, or I don't remember if they knew he was a weapon at the time, but he was the Homelander before Homelander. He was the strongest, most powerful soup that there is, right? So they investigate him. Huey ends up visiting an orphanage for superpowered children, and he ends up learning that, that Nadia, or Newman, is Edgar's adopted daughter, but apparently for some reason, I didn't realize that she was adopted until they revealed it later on, but I don't know if that made sense at the beginning, but he had to just really put on a show kind of being like, well, we don't want this to be for the press. Annie and I are looking to adopt a new soup, and I found that really funny, getting introduced to all of these new characters. It's too bad we never ended up getting one, like, not an adopted kid, but I mean, like, learning a little bit more about their powers, because I found it fascinating. Like, one was climbing off the walls. That'd be cool for a little bit of a side story, but other than that, Frenchie and Kimiko end up finding Soldier Boy's widow, and they try to detain her, but she escapes and ends up killing an innocent bystander. And while I'm on Kimiko, I think out of everyone throughout this entire season so far, I found Butcher's and actually Kimiko's storyline to be the best that we've seen so far. And before this, don't get me wrong, I've always been fascinated by Butcher. I enjoyed following the story throughout the entire time, but when Kimiko's around, I never really cared for her. She shined this season. And of course, we're going to go through what happens to Kimiko in this story. But anyways, off to the side of that, Butcher is on his solo mission with him and Maeve, and he wants to find this guy named Gunpowder. I don't recall why he wanted to kill Gunpowder. Maybe for his ties with Soldier Boy, or maybe he was looking for information and just wanted to kill him. But he ends up taking the V-24. Now Butcher is a soup. And this is what I loved what they did. And you know what's funny is the key art for season 3, you know, when you're scrolling through the seasons, it has a picture representing each season. I didn't even like register that Butcher might become a soup, or he took Compound V or something like that, because it had him with just the glowing eyes, and I thought that was kind of just representing like Butcher being one of the main characters, and he's having his fight against Homelander. I thought that was just like a way that they just made art. But no, Butcher literally ended up getting powers. Now, what I find interesting is where I might as well talk about Huey when he ends up doing it at the same time, because Butcher ended up getting heat vision just like Homelander, excuse me. I don't know if there was any meaning behind that, if there's any feelings that we're going to find out. Throughout the season, we didn't find out how they got their specific powers because Huey ended up getting the teleport, and he's emotionally tied to A-Train, so he can move super fast too. I don't know if maybe they'll figure it out because it was kind of like a failed experiment. If somehow their feelings are connected to it, maybe that's just dumb coming out of my mouth, but I liked that Butcher ended up having the same powers as Homelander to some extent, and Huey ended up having the same powers as A-Train to some extent. And it's funny that Butcher ended up having like the super cool power, and Huey's is cool too, don't get me wrong, but Huey ended up just running around naked, of course, right? So Butcher ends up really, really loving his new power. He's a soup right now, and he just eats the bullets. He's kind of testing everything. He doesn't care right now. He ends up killing Gunpowder, and before that, he reveals, or the information that Butcher was looking for, he gets it out of Gunpowder before he kills him. Mallory was keeping some secrets from him about some mission, right? About Soldier Boy. And that's what they're kind of looking for. They were looking for a weapon to kill Homelander. I'm unsure if they knew that weapon was Soldier Boy or not. Regardless, Butcher gets the information. He has all the hate in his heart, all the hate in the world. Kills Gunpowder anyways. He's feeling good. He's happy with being a soup. And again, the story is really, really fascinating there. So other than that, continuing on with the Soldier Boy story, MM joins back with the boys because he wants to avenge his family's death. And I don't know how much of his family got killed because, of course, he still has his daughter, he still has his wife. I don't know if everybody else is dead or if it just happened from when he was a kid, because I know we saw some flashbacks. It's just not all coming to me at this moment. But MM has some hate in his heart, kind of like Butcher, kind of like someone that we've known so far. But then we move on to Homelander's first meltdown. And another character that I loved that they dove into this time around is the story of Homelander. The guy's still a piece of crap, don't get me wrong, but again, the story is so well written. We learn that Stormfront's still alive. She's basically dead, and Homelander... I can't help but laugh at it. Like, it's a sad thing, I get it. Plus, I don't really feel bad for Stormfront, but Homelander's like, hey, he's visiting her. He's visiting her, and she's on her deathbed. She can barely move. He's like, hey, guess what day it is? It's my birthday. And the dude just whips out his wang and just ends up making him. And I don't know if Stormfront's just that messed up that she was jacking him off like on purpose, or she just couldn't do anything in bed. But regardless, she ended up biting her own tongue. I have to be careful with my words on YouTube over here. And Homelander just went nuts because, again, this was supposed to be his big birthday celebration, and he was going to come back to Stormfront after he's still madly in love. He goes on a rant in front of everybody. It's the first time Homelander ends up losing it. And he starts talking about how he's better than everybody, he's everybody's savior, and why he's being controlled. Everybody should be thanking me. I'm not just like you, because he goes around going, you guys are the real heroes, not me. You're the real heroes. And he sits back and going, no, I'm saving you. You guys need to be thanking me. What am I doing here? Just bending over to everybody. And this is where Homelander really starts to go off the rails, which again is a very, very interesting story. So after that rant, everybody is kind of going crazy about like, what is happening? Your approval ratings are going to plummet. And little do they know, Ashley comes in and she's like, Homelander, you were up among rural white males, by whatever percent it was. It was an astronomical number. And even Homelander himself was worried because Homelander is deeply, weirdly insecure. He wants the approval of everybody, but everybody ended up loving his speech. I like, and I'm not going to talk about or have these debates on YouTube because I keep these opinions private to myself. But what I do like about this show is there's a little bit of a sense of realism in this. They touch on what's been going on in politics on both sides. I've seen a lot of talk online that it's pretty much only, it's making fun of people on the right just a little bit more. But I think that they touch on, if you were to look at it like kind of from an outside perspective, I think you would notice that they touch on both a little bit. Yeah, you know what? They do lean towards the right a little bit, but it's not entirely just making fun of them. It's exploiting the... I can't talk about this on YouTube. It's too touchy. All I ask is that you don't assume anything about my own opinions. But they touch on both sides because we get into that story with A-Train as well. And I get that this season they pushed a little bit more. And you could argue that, I can't, man. I can't. I'm sorry. I just like that it's so real what's going on. And again, I ask you that you don't assume anything about me, okay? I ask that, just please respect that about me. You don't know anything about me or my personal beliefs. It's pretty close to what would really happen. Like, you would have people reacting this way on both sides, the way that it was shown throughout the show. And of course, it doesn't encapsulate the entire parties, but the people who are going out and speaking, right? Enough of that. So, Homelander senses that people loves him, or knows that people loves him after that. He feels untouchable. He doesn't care about the plane video anymore by Annie. He doesn't care about what Gus has to say to him. He's powerful. He can do what he wants. No matter what, his approval rating is going to be there. So what happens is he ends up threatening genocide. If anybody just crosses him, he's going to threaten genocide. Now, this is where he starts going after Starlight just a little bit. He ends up firing people, but more specifically, he goes after Starlight. He wants to get in the way of Huey. He ends up reinstating the Deep into the Seven. They have this crazy reality show, and that's, again, something that I was talking about. If superheroes were real, they would make a big advertisement out of it. They would have, who's going to join the Seven next? Is it going to be this person or this person? Homelander drags the Deep back from the bowels of obscurity, which is ridiculous. I hate the Deep. The dude is the worst character in this entire show. Great actor, fantastic actor at what he does, and he's such a good actor because I hate him so much. He's such a little scumbag. So Starlight has to forgive him. She has to kiss Homelander. She has to hold this psychopath's hands and kind of cheat on Huey. She has to do it all, but Huey is supporting her. That's crazy because I wouldn't be able to do that. I don't care. I wouldn't be able to continue a relationship with somebody if they were like kissing another man. Like, and I get it. They're doing this willingly with their mission. Whatever you want, you have to find a way to kill Homelander. I'm going to go along with it, which she didn't want to do at first, but she's playing along with it. Now, there's this character named Supersonic that we were introduced to that I didn't really touch on. Little bit of a scumbag, right? He's your typical girl's best friend, right? Your girlfriend's best friend who secretly has the other motives that he has. There's a little bit of playful tension in there where he pretends to be in love with her, but we all know that this dude is a little bit of a sleazeball. This dude is a scumbag. This dude just wants to get in Annie's pants and wants to be the friend that's always there for her. So I didn't really care. This dude, I hate people like that. They're worse. The nice guys, these nice guys, I'm just going to be here to be your pal, right? No, these guys are the worst kinds of people, and I do not care that Homelander dragged him on a roof and Homelander beat his face in because that is not right. That is not right, and that should never happen. But these guys are little dirtbags, man. They're little dirtbags, and the world doesn't see them for what they are. So, dude, they're worse than Homelander, man. These nice guys. Just, I'll say anything to get in your pants. I'm your best friend. I'm always here for you, right? The worst kinds of people. So I hated him just as much as Huey hated him. And Starlight's like, oh, you don't need to worry about anything. And then she's like, please, Supersonic, don't join the Seven. Homelander, I didn't want to tell you this, but Homelander is a bad guy. He joins anyways and gets his face beaten. Homelander just goes, hey, Starlight, can I show you something? Drags her up to the roof, and it's just his face being pounded there. He's dead, and I didn't care. So Starlight was all upset, but hey, that's a good progression to the story, in my opinion. Dude was a dirtbag. In the meantime, though, the boys end up visiting Mallory because, of course, of this brand new information, and Butcher kind of lashes out on her, and Butcher also has to take a little bit of a pause because he's experiencing a little bit of, a hangover, I guess you can call it, from the new V that he was taking, the test V, the V24. I'm having a blank on what exactly it was called, but it doesn't matter. Grace ends up admitting to the secret mission that she was on and didn't end up telling, and then with the way that the events would have turned out, it would have made Butcher have a potential for Becca to be alive, and Ryan, never really be there, which is what Butcher's ideal life would be. So he ends up saying something along the lines of, like, you'll never see me again, I'll never effing forgive you, something like that. He leaves, and Ryan, who's being watched over by Mallory, I don't remember if that was established before the beginning of this season, but regardless, he's being watched over by her Aunt Grace, I think she called her, but this is where I struggle with Butcher because he's an interesting character. He's cool to follow, but the dude has so much hate in his heart. He's just enraged at Mallory right now. And Ryan's like, Butcher, where are you going? You said you're going to watch out for me. And he says something along the lines to him like, don't you think that I don't want to see you? What you did to my Becca? Crazy. Understandable rage, but pointing it out on an innocent kid who obviously didn't know that what he was doing, it was not the way to do it. And this is where I kind of saw it coming, or this was at least my prediction, where this would be the beginning of Ryan like having a little bit of a hateful arc, and that's why he would get a little bit closer to Homelander. because Butcher was kind of the one looking over him. Butcher was kind of the one saving him from acting upon his emotions, because what we've seen so far is once he taps into his hate, once he gets angry, then people start dying. That's probably the same case for Homelander, but I was like, oh boy, that's not good. Other than that, they end up having a plan to go to Russia, and as far as I know, Butcher is completely done with Mallory. Now we're introduced to a new character named Nina, and Nina is this strange character with, again, just tapping into the the strange kinks that this show kind of has going on, because she wants to, you know, walk Frenchie like a dog, to put it in a normal way. Excuse me for my notification there. Sorry about that. But regardless, she ends up getting them, I guess, travel arrangements or a location to the weapon. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but regardless, they end up taking a trip to Russia. And Huey ends up having Kimiko break his arm to get an excuse to not have Newman suspicious and have an excuse for him to be off work. So Huey ends up secretly learning about V24, and Butcher ends up saying, absolutely not, no way, you can't be part of this. Huey secretly ends up taking a dose, which we kind of saw coming. And this is, again, what I found it fascinating immediately. And I don't know if anybody can comment down below and also made that connection, because I don't know if it was intentional or not for Butcher to have the Homelander powers, Huey to have kind of like the A-Train powers. They end up going into wherever Soldier Boy's being kept in Russia. They kill a bunch of guards. This is where Butcher kind of reveals that he has powers to everybody. And it's very strange. It's like this really cool moment. Butcher, and you can tell from Butcher's character, you can tell that he is enjoying cutting people with lasers. Huey ends up saving the day, though, with his powers. And everybody's like, you have powers too? What is going on here? And funny enough, Huey has to teleport out of his clothes. So he's always ending up naked. Butcher has this super cool power. Huey also has a cool power, but of course it has a little bit of a humiliating touch to it. Anyways, they're inside the lab. They end up finding Soldier Boy. They end up finding that this weapon is alive. And I don't recall, and I didn't know while watching this show as well, if Soldier Boy was the weapon that everybody was talking about, because we know there is a weapon. Did they know that it was Soldier Boy the weapon, or did they kind of figure out that Soldier Boy was the weapon? I don't know. Regardless, Soldier Boy comes out. He is more powerful than Homelander, and he is radioactive. When he ends up, what we learn after is that he has PTSD. He's all up in his mind, and he can't help but explode, have this radioactive explosion. What happens is he blows Kimiko up, and it also, I guess they described it as he fried the V out of her system. But anyways, he depowers Kimiko. Depowers her completely. She's not healing. They're freaking out. Soldier Boy is up. Soldier Boy was asleep. Soldier Boy was in one of the wars. I don't remember which one it was, but regardless. Oh, did they talk about D-Day? I think they did. It doesn't really matter. He was part of a war. So they're worried about Kimiko, and this is where the tension's really, really beginning with Butcher, because Butcher seemingly doesn't care about Kimiko, and Kimiko is dying. She is just taken a blast. She barely survived it. They need to get her to a doctor. They're driving in a van, and all Butcher's talking about was, did they experiment on Soldier Boy? And it's also apparently a shock that Soldier Boy's still alive, because he was presumed dead so long ago, and this is where Homelander kind of ended up taking his place. Now, back in the US, we are brought back to Newman, who ends up accusing Edgar or Gus of corruption and kind of explaining why everything's kind of going crazy right now. So there's also, like, we had a little bit of a relationship built up between the two, but not enough to necessarily care about it. I still don't know if, like, she was adopted. I don't remember when we learned it. Apologies. I hope you guys are still enjoying this video, even though some of the facts that I have over here are touchy. But other than that, Newman is provided a sample of Compound V, which she ends up giving to her daughter. If I had to guess, that's for her own protection, but it obviously hurt her and she cares about her daughter. I don't know why. I would imagine that we're going to end up getting another head popper down the road, but, or maybe Ryan's going to fight her. I don't know how that's going to go exactly, but other than that, Annie is still kind of working to team up against Homelander, but Homelander ends up threatening Huey. Because A-Train, oh, that's what it was. A-Train ended up ratting her out, and Homelander knew about it, so he's like, Annie, had enough of this. I'm going to do it to Huey. Next, it's going to be Huey. If you didn't have enough with Supersonic, he's dead, but Huey's going to be next. So no more talking behind my back, no more scheming, no more any of this. I'm in power. Homelander has all of the power at this point in the show. Continuing on back on the Kimiko story, though, Frenchie ends up admitting her to the hospital, and she ends up being really, really happy that she doesn't have her powers anymore. They end up bonding a little bit. She ends up kissing him, and this is where my heart broke a little bit because I'm getting a little bit more into like Kimiko's story over here. And Kimiko, we learn she likes to sing and dance. So she starts daydreaming about like going throughout the hospital and having this little play. She likes to sing. She likes to dance. She realizes Frenchie deeply cares about her. She gives him a kiss. And she kind of speaks, but not yet. Frenchie ends up being overwhelmed by the kiss, I guess, and ends up leaving and gets kidnapped by Nina. Which is, I'm going to talk about it now, this next part, because it's so sad. And Kimiko just was thinking about texting him all these different things like, I'm sorry it won't happen again. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. She's really, really upset because she thinks that Frenchie just abandoned her, but Frenchie ended up getting kidnapped, which was so sad. That's probably like the saddest thing that's happened so far. Like, not even just like Maeve dying, but no, it might, like, I'm talking about from this season, because last season, I think the best part of the show so far was when Becca died. That made me actually want to tear up and like cry a little bit, but my heart sank a little bit for Kimiko, right? Because it's a love story that's been building for a little while. She has the courage to kiss him, and she feels bad. She thinks it's all her fault. Oh, tough stuff, man. Other than that, Huey ends up talking to Starlight about V24, and she starts going crazy. They battle a little bit because Huey doesn't want to always be saved by Starlight. He wants to be the one to save her. And this was this is a story from the beginning of time, right? A man can't be with a girl where the girl is more powerful than the man. Like, you cannot be in a relationship with a girl when the girl can beat you up, because it just shows how weak you are, and then it's going to drive you insane inside. Unless your body is completely screwed up or your mind is completely screwed up, that will bother you. And so the tensions are there. Huey ends up admitting a little bit down the line that he doesn't want, like he said at the beginning, that Starlight being stronger than him didn't bother her, but it does bother him. And then he started going, well, sometimes, but of course it does bother him. So he's going to keep using the powers, or he admitted to Starlight that it won't happen again. He's done with the drug, but of course he's flat out lying. But speaking of that same drug, Maeve ends up delivering her a little bit more to Butcher. They drink a little bit, even though they've both been sober, and they end up hooking up. I thought that was going to be the beginning of a relationship, but that didn't seem to be the case. They just ended up, yeah, they just had sex. In the meantime, though, we're officially introduced to this character named Blue Hawk, and I don't think they showed exactly who he was killing, but apparently he was going after crime, specifically in a very touchy subject. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm sorry. It's just, I want to be very safe for YouTube, guys. You know what was going on. Blue Hawk is killing a specific group of people. A-Train had an issue with that. Nathan, his brother, ended up getting injured. I'm sorry. I know. I would love to talk about it. I ask again that you don't assume anything about my own political beliefs, but once you start getting into that 2020 territory and everything that happened with all the protests, I'm not going to talk about it on YouTube. Sorry, I know that you come here for the entire story, but it's, at the end of the day, it's just a little bit of character development for A-Train. A-Train's wanting to rebrand himself. That's what we can kind of get from that, okay? I don't mean to demean it. I don't mean to dismiss it in any way. It's just probably not allowed to talk about it without getting a flat age restriction or demonetization, okay? Anyways, in the meantime, Ashley is named the new CEO after Edgar ended up taking off, and she is still crazy. She ends up using a strap-on on somebody, and she goes a little bit power hungry. She's still ripping the hair out of her head. But other than that, Soldier Boy, ends up coming to the U.S., and we figure out that his explosions are caused by PTSD. He's thinking about everything that's going on. He ends up just immediately exploding a building and killing a bunch of people. So everybody knows that Soldier Boy's back. At the beginning, people aren't necessarily sure if it was Soldier Boy, but somehow, and I forget how, they figure out that Soldier Boy's going to go after his former team members and who he was going to next. So Butcher and Huey end up with MM, who MM is just filled with rage right now, wants to take on Soldier Boy, which doesn't make sense, right? Butcher actually shows a little bit of compassion by roofing MM and puts him to sleep. It's strange to me how he shows his affection for some people, but he ended up getting the job done. Butcher and Huey are back on the V. Annie doesn't want Huey to do it, but after Soldier Boy ended up killing one of his former teammates, Butcher ends up making an arrangement for him, saying, like, we'll help you find everybody if you help us with just one more person on your kill list. Huey and Annie have very different worldviews about this. Annie wants him off the drugs, and Annie thinks that Soldier Boy is just, you can't team up with him because it is teaming up with a bad guy, somebody who's on a killing rampage, right? Huey ends up leaving Annie, and I thought this was going to be the beginning of a little bit of a breakdown for the relationship. Luckily, that didn't end up being the case, but Huey ended up leaving this episode with leaving Annie, kind of. I don't know if you could really do that, but they couldn't come to an agreement. We then move on to the Deep being the little scumbag that he is, and he's with Homelander, and they end up finding security footage of Soldier Boy killing the person that he just killed. I don't recall that person's name, but they figure out that it actually is. Like, they're like, okay, this is impossible. How is Soldier Boy still alive? But Homelander does know that it actually is him. Black Noir weirdly just leaves and cuts out his tracker. And Homelander, when he learns about this, he's deeply hurt about it because he actually, like, really, really cared for Black Noir, which is strange. But in the meantime, Kimiko ends up being kidnapped in the hospital by Nina as well. And she's brought to this, I don't know where it was, but she's brought to where Frenchie was naked, tied to a pole. And she's with, Kimiko's tied up and Sherry's tied up. And Nina is making Frenchie choose which one to kill. If he doesn't choose, then he's going to kill both of them. I think the right answer would have been Sherry, because like you love Kimiko, right? You got to love Kimiko. But Kimiko ends up freeing herself and ends up stabbing people to death. Ends up saving the day. Nina escapes. And now we're brought to okay, before that, okay. So there's a little bit of a scene with Newman trying to get with Starlight and have a transactional relationship, one that she offers to Homelander. But Starlight ends up just saying, hey, F you, I'm done working with people. Then Newman was kind of like, hey, we can help each other. Other than that, we're brought to the Hero-gasm event. Once a year, where the soups get together and just have all this messed up stuff. Annie and MM are together, going there alone. Huey, Soldier Boy, and Butcher are together, but Huey ends up saying, hey, Soldier Boy, just let me figure out where these twins are, because that's who Soldier Boy wants to come kill, and you don't need to kill anybody else. I'll teleport there. I'll be back in 3 minutes. Huey walks around. All this messed up crap's going on. The guy with the giant cock is, it's so weird. It's like a snake, man, like an actual, like, giant snake. All these people are doing messed up things to each other. It's really gross to look at. It's very uncomfortable, but Huey fits right in because when he teleports, he's naked. What's interesting, though, is he bumps into A-Train. He bumps into A-Train there, and they kind of share a little bit of words with each other at first, and then Huey, starting to feel confident, and this is something that he expressed early on, he's finally like, hey, a-hole, you never apologize for what you did. And this is the interesting part, because you can see that A-Train's kind of having a little bit of a character development, because he seems to actually feel a little bit sorry for what he does, and he felt sorry for what happened to his brother. He's trying to actually do the right thing and be a little bit mindful, but at the end of the day, the guy's still a piece of crap, because he ran through Huey's girlfriend, laughed about it. No good person does that, and I think something like that's unforgivable. I don't care how much you're trying to make it up to your brother. I don't care how much you're trying to make it up to your community. You are still a bad guy. And personally, when talking about things in real life, I'm having trouble shifting my focus on this, because something that I've been a little bit more open about is my faith, and what we need to do is just forgive everybody, right? I can't do that. I understand this is fiction, but I'm talking about, like, even in my real life. I'm like, no, that's unforgivable. Why would I ever forgive? Like, let's say this happened in real life. Why would we ever give this guy a second chance who laughed about running through a girl? That's one thing, having an accident, but A-Train admits it's an accident here. And it seems like it's an actual genuine growth. Unlike what's happening with the Deep, where it's all a fake act, right? Because he just still ends up doing something gross with his wife, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Oh my God, something that I forgot to talk about is when Homelander made the Deep eat the octopus. That was disgusting. I don't remember when that happened, but that was flat out disgusting. Ugh. But, so, Huey's standing up to A-Train because Huey now has powers. Huey can hit like a truck. And A-Train said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to happen. It seemed like an actual genuine apology, and, like, A-Train really does feel bad about it. Huey doesn't accept the apology and just punches him in the face. And A-Train's like, how did you just do that? Because, of course, Huey's just a guy. He can't hit A-Train. And he's kind of speculating that he's on the V. Annie comes in, stops it. And they're like, kind of, what are you doing here? They start arguing a little bit. Annie wants to evacuate everybody. Soldier Boy's coming in. And they're still arguing Annie and Huey, which obviously isn't good. But then they turn around. And Soldier Boy decided to just stroll in because it's been a few minutes. And Huey decided to spend his time talking to A-Train. Soldier Boy then finds the new twins and can't really process the information. He's kind of figuring out, like, what happened to him. He's trying to figure out what's going on with Vought, and people are saying that it was Black Noir, but he's still having PTSD moments, and it's overwhelming him, and then he starts being radioactive again. He blows up the entire place, killing so many people, injuring so many people, and the only people that are kind of well, there's people left alive, but the people that are kind of left untouched, I don't want to say untouched, but I mean, like, they have their suit powers, right? But they're still hurt, is our main group. What's interesting about this, though, is Homelander drops in. And this is where I'm like, oh, man. Like, my heart sank when Homelander dropped in, because we already knew, like, Annie knew that Homelander was coming, right? We have the face-off with Soldier Boy. Butcher ends up attacking Homelander. They have this crazy fight. Huey jumps in. Soldier Boy's still attacking Homelander. We have this really, really insane fight. They're taking on each other, right? And there's really nothing to break down about that. They just hit each other, kind of. But then they end up actually pinning Homelander down. And this is where we figure out, okay, Homelander is not completely immortal. Soldier Boy actually can take this guy on. Huey's dodging his punches. Butcher's using his own powers. They kind of have like the Superman thing where they have the heat vision to themselves. They blast together, but the three of them together are too much for Homelander. They pin him down, one on each arm, and Soldier Boy's on top of him. And you can see Homelander is genuinely a little bit fearful. But unfortunately, before he was overwhelmed and before Soldier Boy could take away his powers, Homelander escapes. Homelander leaves. Homelander's the one to retreat. Homelander, we figure out at this point, can officially be beaten. That wasn't the point. And this is the thing that really sucks, man, because this could be like such a heart-wrenching thing, but I already know from the key art of season 4 that Homelander stays alive. That's what I hate about this, but it was still a really, really tense thing, and it was a major step through with the characters because they now know that they have the tool to be able to beat Homelander. The Psycho can actually end up dying. In the meantime, A-Train decides to run, kill Blue Hawk in the funniest way possible by just running and dragging him on the pavement. Straight up just destroys him, but he ends up having a heart attack. But it was worth it to him because with those actions, his brother ended up being paralyzed. A-Train faints, but we don't know what happens to him yet. At the end of this episode, Annie decides it's officially time to tell the world about what's going on with Homelander. She announces that she quits a 7. They expressed earlier with Newman, too, that she has something like 200 million followers, but her influence is, like, insane. She ends up, like, just revealing the truth about everything that's going on. This is where you get the political unrest, because some people believe Annie, some people don't. Individual media, maybe that's somebody to take into consideration, but I understand the people who think that Annie's bought and sold, right? Very fascinating the way that something like this would be taken care of in the real world. But actually, speaking of the real world, we're brought to something that's not the real world at all, because we figure out that Black Noir kind of lives by himself, and he's imagining all of these cartoon characters. I don't think they're real characters. I think they're imaginary friends, but they end up reenacting his abuse that he's had from Soldier Boy, and this is why he kind of ran away, because he was abused by Soldier Boy, and Black Noir's mind ends up convincing himself a little bit to, hey, we need to get revenge on Soldier Boy, and then Black Noir, I guess, goes back. Super weird out of everything you could have done with Black Noir's story, but hey, you know what? At the end of the day, it was still very, very fun to watch. Other than that, we figure out what happens to A-Train. A-Train wakes up, and then Ashley's talking to him like, hey, you're going to be able to run again. We gave you Blue Hawk's heart, which is so weird. And she's like, again, it was just weird, man. It was weird because he just murdered this man, and now they found him, I guess, on the ground, probably because of his tracker. I would imagine they can monitor his heart, but he ends up having Blue Hawk's heart. But then we're back over to Soldier Boy, and the next guy that Soldier Boy wants to go after is a character named Mindstorm, and this is where I really, really liked this entire scene that they had going on here, because I thought that was a very interesting power. Kind of reminds me, if you guys have ever watched Demon Slayer, one of my favorite episodes is when the demon can kind of make you stuck in a dream, and the same kind of thing was happening here, but we learn so much about Butcher here. Soldier Boy is coming with them. We figure out that Butcher's idea to just keep him high on weed because he's experiencing PTSD. And another thing that I forgot to mention is that guy who makes movies or something, Huey ended up talking to him, and he's like, well, that was all for the camera. Soldier Boy didn't do anything, and Huey ends up confronting him, but I'm jumping the gun a little bit here. Soldier Boy says, okay, next on our list, nothing you should know, don't look him in the eyes. If he tries to make eye contact with you, don't do it. They find him right away, and Butcher looks at him in the eyes and goes, oh shit, and falls asleep. What happens is he's trapped in a never-ending nightmare until he dies from dehydration. We learn so much about Butcher here and how he's becoming his father, or became his father. We learn so much about his brother. And what's crazy about it is Butcher, I don't know if he's always felt sorry for what he did to his brother or how he became. It showed like exactly word for like action for action, how he slowly ended up becoming his father. And I know that was shown through a different group of scenes, but it's all worth kind of talking about now. He feels horrible for Lenny. He hates the person that he's become. There's nothing but hate in his heart. He hates his father. He hates everybody. And he's so sorry. He ends up being trapped in the nightmare. He knows it's a nightmare at first, or he speculates that it's some sort of dream. But then he ends up getting into it, into his nightmare. He's trying to convince himself to not do the actions that he'd taken in his past. In the meantime, though, Soldier Boy and Huey end up like wanting to find this guy, and Soldier Boy's going to kill him. But Huey's like, no, we can make him wake him up. Please, please. And Soldier Boy said, nope, we have a job. We're going to take care of the job. That's what he would have wanted. Before Soldier Boy can kill Mindstorm, Huey ends up using his powers to take him away and bring him back. He makes a deal, say, wake up, my friend. And what's funny enough is the old guy was like, I've been in his mind. You know, that guy's a piece of crap, eh? And he was just like, I just don't want to leave anybody behind. He saved me. I need to save him too. They end up making a deal. He wakes him up, and then Huey will teleport him wherever he wants and never speak about it again. He ends up waking up Butcher. Butcher wakes up going, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He's freaked out. He's crying. And this is where I'm interested to see if Butcher has a change in character moving forward, because he's been forced to realize what he's become over the course of the seasons, or I mean, over the course of his life, really. He's become his father, the guy that he despises. I'm very interested to see if that's where Butcher's story ends up going, because you can tell that he truthfully does feel bad. Doesn't really excuse the hate in his heart and the people he's killed over the years, but he does really, really feel bad for it. Huey ends up going, all right, deal's a deal. Where do you want to go? Huey stupidly ended up trusting this guy too by looking at him in the eyes. Before that could happen, it was something like a ninja star Soldier Boy threw in his eye, ended up just beating him to death. Let me guess, Black Noir, but Black Noir was, I guess, really the person that was at fault for everything. Beats this guy to death. I wasn't sure if they were going to end up fighting there, but the group kind of stayed intact and stayed together. In the meantime, though, Annie ends up talking to Kimiko, and Kimiko decides that she does want her powers back. I think it's because of a self-defense type thing, but regardless, she came to a realization that she always blamed the Compound V for the monster that she was, but she's come to the realization that she was always the monster. It was always her fault. Her powers really had nothing to do with it. So she wanted her powers back. She wanted to heal again. She wanted to perhaps protect herself if anything ever came up. So she ends up convincing Annie after a short conversation to go get some more Compound V. But in the meantime, Homelander confronts Annie and still threatens her, still talks about killing Supersonic, right? He ends up making all of these confessions, and Annie was recording in her pocket, live streaming, still getting the whole world to kind of hate Homelander for the most part, still creating some more divide. Annie goes back. She ends up, it's funny, the Homelander's like, Starlight, I told you to not record me when we're doing our lines like that. But she ends up restoring Kimiko's power. Kimiko ends up being really happy. She's back to normal. The soup is back and ready to go. Something else that I forgot to mention about that was that Annie, while she was in the lab looking for Compound V, she figured out that V24 is fatal. It kind of, I think she described it as turning your brain into mush, and that would explain why Butcher was throwing up green liquid. Huey and Butcher are both like bleeding the green liquid from their nose and from their ears. It's kind of coming out. Even Huey ended up talking to Butcher at some point saying, hey, your brain's leaking. And I think he was kind of like making a joke, not really understanding. And it has some like insane side effects. But after about 5 doses, it's fatal. And she calls Butcher over and over again. Butcher, don't know why she trusted Butcher, but she calls him. She's like, oh, well, I promise I'll tell him. Didn't tell him, but instead in Butcher's own twisted way, wanted to save Huey. They're about to go on another mission. Butcher knocks him out and shuts the door. Huey ends up understanding that this is to protect him, but even before that, he goes, wow, you are a spitting image, my brother. Kabang! Knocks Huey out. Still doesn't tell him. We're then brought to Homelander a little bit, and Homelander is called by Soldier Boy, who, I don't know how he got his number, but anyway, Soldier Boy got a hold of him and revealed that he is Homelander's father. Don't know if they came up with that plan or if there was any truth to it. It was a little bit confusing to me, but regardless, Annie ends up picking up Huey. They end up making up. Everything's okay with them, but Annie starts to get into an entire I told you so type thing where she ends up telling Huey exactly what's wrong, but then Huey ends up appreciating Butcher because Butcher protects him, and Huey kind of sees that, but Annie's still pissed off at Butcher because Butcher didn't tell him. The other couple things that happened before we reached the climax of the season is Homelander ended up visiting Ryan again. He got the information. How did he get the information? I don't remember. He got the information. I'm sorry. I don't remember how he got the information. He found out somehow about the whereabouts of Ryan, ends up bonding with him a little bit, and he's a little bit upset that he's referring to Aunt Grace as somebody else other than Homelander. And he kind of comes to this approach with Ryan where he's like, when you're as strong as us, I understand. Accidents happen. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you for what happened to Becca. Everything's okay, and I promise you I will always love you no matter what, and I will always be here for you. Ryan really needed that, especially after what happened to Becca and what happened to Butcher after Butcher told him. So Ryan is back with Homelander. The great father that he is decides to bring him to Vought Tower, but we're not quite there yet. The other thing that we end up figuring out is Maeve was captured by Homelander and she escapes. I guess she pretended to faint from some gas or something, but regardless, she ended up escaping. Homelander ends up going back to the Vought Tower and was really, really happy that Noir was there. He gives him a hug and just rips his heart out from him. Noir has this really sad death where the characters that is made up in his head, I don't know if they're real cartoons, I don't think they are, but his imaginary friends, he's laying there to the side and they're like, it's okay, soon you'll be with Jesus Christ. It'll all be okay. And Black Noir died. Homelander killed him. Homelander killed Black Noir, the one that he seemed to cared for. We're then, though, brought to the final confrontation where Butcher, Soldier Boy, and Maeve all end up getting ready to kill Homelander. But Soldier Boy ends up attacking Ryan. Out of all people, Homelander ended up bringing Ryan because Homelander wanted to have this big grand moment where it's like, hey, this is your father. And Soldier Boy just looks at him and goes, what a weak, pathetic man you are. And then, so he ends up attacking Homelander. He ends up attacking Ryan. But Butcher, and this is where I'm curious too, if Butcher is having a little bit of a change of heart or he always loved Ryan. He's keeping his promise because Butcher, throughout the entire series, never keeps promises. He literally hung up the phone with Annie saying, I promise I'll tell Huey. But he's defending Ryan because he made a promise. I don't know if Butcher's going to have a character change there, but Butcher ends up defending Ryan. Everybody ends up attacking Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy gets the upper hand on everybody. There's this really cool scene with Annie. Huey's watching from the security cameras, turn everything up, and Annie has this big grand shot at Soldier Boy, which I honestly thought that she was going to kill Soldier Boy, but didn't even really faze him. He's going to get radioactive. He's going to blow the whole place up. He's going to kill everybody there. Everybody's kind of holding on to Soldier Boy. They decide ultimately that it's better to kill Soldier Boy than it is to kill Homelander. But Maeve ends up saving the day and having this huge, huge moment where she tackles Soldier Boy, gets him out of there, and they have an explosion in the sky. And I thought that's where both of them were going to die, but they apparently died. The public thinks they died, if I'm not mistaken. And it's really what really stood out to me was Butcher end up holding Ryan and kind of ready to take the blast for him because he was kind of holding him like this. Butcher still had his suit powers and he's kind of like covering Ryan, even though Ryan could probably withstand whatever's going on there. But then again, we don't really know because we've seen him kill Subs. We've seen him take away their powers. We don't know, but Butcher was risking his life to save him, save Ryan. Maeve ends up saving the day from everybody. But what we end up learning, of course, is that Maeve is alive. She just doesn't have any powers anymore. She wants to escape with her girlfriend, move somewhere, ideally a farm. So she's going to have a nice happy ending with an eye patch, I guess. But the public thinks that Maeve died. The public thinks that Soldier Boy died. Soldier Boy is put back into the tank, which if I had to imagine, I don't know how many seasons they're planning on the boys, but if I had to imagine, he's going to get waken up again at some point. But regardless, Ryan chose to go back with Homelander instead of Butcher. Butcher really, really wanted Ryan, but Homelander's the one who understands Ryan. Ryan chooses to go back with Homelander. It looks like Ryan's going to end up being a little bit more on the evil side, and that's going to be Butcher's fault because Butcher just was pissed off at Grace and lashed out at Ryan. Totally his fault. We also learned that Butcher is terminally ill due to the V24 usage. They gave him 12, maximum 18 months. I don't know if that means he can keep using it or if the damage is already done, he can keep using it. Regardless, he just tells the doctor to just F off and starts smoking inside the hospital. The boys are back together and Annie officially joins the team and they're saying kind of like Butcher's not going to run things anymore. It's going to be a democracy, but Butcher didn't tell anybody that he's terminally ill and he seems to be just okay with it. Like he's silent. He just didn't say anything. So I would imagine he's okay with Starlight kind of joining and he's kind of like, I think Butcher's having a little bit of a change of heart, but maybe we'll see him be a little bit more selfless now that he knows that he's dying. But knowing Butcher, he's not going to really say anything. Besides that, at the end of this episode, we also learn that Newman is making her way up as vice president because she had the Deep end up killing the guy who was already going to be chosen. But regardless, they decide that the head popper needs to go. That's what season 4 is probably going to be about. But then again, that seemed to be the beginning of this season and the beginning of the end of last season where they were going to attack her. So who knows how long that story is going to end up. Maybe she's going to be the big bad final boss. The season comes to a close though when Homelander officially introduces Ryan to the world. They fly down. The Starlight supporter throws a can at Ryan, which was so dumb. I don't even care that he died. It was so dumb. Homelander gets very protective over Ryan and just beams his head off. And now, what I've been waiting for since I started watching this show has officially happened. That meme. I was wondering when that Homelander meme would come. Every single time I saw Homelander in a crowd, I was like, is it going to happen now? You know, where he doesn't realize that the crowd loves him. He kind of like smiles like this. And the music's like, and that was a meme for so long. I didn't know what the boys were. Didn't watch the show. I saw that everywhere. I was wondering when that was going to take place. And I finally saw the meme. I was waiting for it and it was bothering me. So I'm very glad that I ended up seeing that. But regardless, Homelander learns that he can kill a random Starlight supporter. And the crowd will praise him for it. So Homelander is going to get even more unhinged. Ryan's okay with it because Ryan ended up giving a smirk watching somebody die. Homelander Ryan is going to be a problem. The head popper is going to be a problem. The boys are back together. Everything's A-okay. MM let go of a little bit of anger. Soldier Boy's gone. MM also ended up opening up to his daughter about where his anger is coming from, the history of his family. Everything's okay. Everybody's relationship's great. Frenchie and Kimiko are great. Everybody's together. The next mission is to take care of the head popper. This season was fantastic. The show continues to be fantastic. It's so realistic for such a fictional story, and I love it, guys. Let me know what you thought about the entirety of Season 3 down below. I cannot wait to watch Season 4. If you watched this far into the video, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you. On the screen right now, if you want to continue watching the channel, I have a movie review for Inside Out over here and Better Call Saul Season 4 over here. You can check out either one of these videos, guys. I will see you over there or in the next video. Take care.